Welcome to the UN Brief. Today we interview Maher Nasser, Director at the UN Department of Global Communications in New York, to speak about the annual report and the priorities set up by the Committee on Information on the work of the UN News and Media Division, the Outreach Section, the Office of the Spokesperson, advertising campaigns, ambassador programs with celebrities in sports and film, and the overall strategic communications using social media platforms. With an annual budget of roughly 90 million US, the department has a pivotal role on shaping the public perception of the organization around the globe. Thank you for watching the UN Brief, and don't forget to subscribe. The Committee on Information is quite an important meeting that happens every year, right? To sort of make an appraisal of the campaigns and what is working, what's not working, and also hear the country members who decide what is the trust for the coming year. Where should you be investing? Where the priorities are?
The Committee on Information is the body that reports is part of the intergovernmental processes that govern and provides guidance to the Department of Global Communications. It is part of the fourth committee. You know, the people know in the UN there are 6 committees, and each of them is focused on a specific area. And the fourth committee is the Special Political and Decolonization Committee, and the Committee on Information was created 45 years ago. And the department submits an annual report to the General Assembly through this. It's the Secretary General's report, of course, that includes the work of the department from the date of the report up to the meeting of the committee. So what has the department done, our focus and our strategy since the report was submitted to them, because the report covers the period up to the end of last year. So it's basically an update. And then member states, of course, we hear their statements reflecting on the report of the committee, of the department, feedback, welcoming some of the activities, asking us to do more in one area or another. And of course, as with anything related to a multiplicity of governments, there aren't always the same views. So we have different views on certain issues. But one thing that definitely was clear is, of course, the strong support for the work of the department, the strong support for our work to counter misinformation and disinformation that we started 3 years ago with COVID-19, and focusing on how to change behavior of how people share information in a way that reduces the mis and disinformation that is out there, and how can we flood the internet, as the Secretary General tasked the department to do at the beginning of the pandemic, with credible, factual, science-based information on the pandemic. So that we have continued to do, and now Verified, which is the campaign that focused on that, continues, but Verified is continuing to address the issue of misinformation, disinformation that also relates to climate change, that addresses maybe conflicts in some areas, that has to do with hate speech. How do we counter hate speech and incitement using tools, digital tools? The other aspect, of course, is all the other mandates that the department is looking after, and observances, annual days, and it was really heartening to hear the strong support of member states for the work of the department. One initiative that we launched last year, Football for the Goals, that's why you see 3 footballs behind me. Football for the Goals was an initiative that we launched in July of last year. If you are in the football world, a club, a federation, a national team, famous player, a foundation, an NGO that works around football, then you can join Football for the Goals as a member by committing to sustainability, committing to supporting and advocating for and implementing the SDGs, commitment to equality and equity, especially gender. More than just having them speak about these issues, but it's also about having them implement those principles. So when you talk about gender equality, you can't pay women footballers less than men footballers. You can't pay less attention to the girls' team that you pay to the boys' team. So this is also the expectation. It's not that they only talk about the SDGs, which is important, but it's so how they actually also implement also human rights approach in protecting the interests of the players, of the audience, of the protecting children, and fighting racism. That's very important because also football is an important and very good tool. You know, footballers become really icons, and people listen to them, young people. So this was a very successful, and many member states really expressed their support and interest in that. Of course, we always have stressing about is multilingualism. Is that as an organization of the United Nations, that we commit to doing the work that we do in as many languages, definitely the 6 official languages, of course, but also as many languages as possible.
Another aspect I have seen on the document, in the draft report, is the question of allowing journalists from developing countries to have a voice, to participate in the UN press conferences, to be accredited at the United Nations as well. And also women too, because as you know, historically, the majority of the UN news correspondents have been male, because just the institution was mostly led and staffed by male professionals. So tell us a little bit about that aspect and what countries are looking forward to support that more. What's their interest?
This program, we call it the Riham al-Farra Fellowship Program. It's a program whereby the department, we identify journalists in developing countries and countries with economies in transition, and we sponsor their visit to New York for 3 weeks during the General Assembly at the high-level week. So in the past, we used to be able to bring 8 to 9 journalists, and the period that they would stay with us was about 5 weeks, which included a visit to Washington or doing more than just New York. And member states actually asked us to increase the number of journalists. So instead of, because the budget is limited, so we reduced the time that they are here and increased the number to 15. So every year we have been bringing, except of course because of COVID, the last 2 years, 3 years, we organized it virtually. It wasn't in the same way for a journalist, of course, to participate virtually from where they are, different time zone. It wasn't as effective, I guess, but it was still a way to ensure the continuity of the program.
Excellent. So to wrap it up, can you just tell us a little bit what has been decided that will be the priorities going forward for the next cycle of programs, and the direction that the Department of Global Communications should have? What was decided? What do you say would be the 3 priorities that have been discussed and will be pushed forward?
The priorities for 2023, we have, as a department, we have a communication strategy that we developed towards the end of the year, and we announced the priorities for the beginning of the year. And of course, member states are apprised of this, and they have expressed full support for it. So this year, of course, we have it is the middle year between the adoption of the SDGs and the year of implementation of the SDGs. And there's an SDG summit in September. So a lot of the focus and emphasis now is on, of course, how do we energize or turbocharge the implementation of the SDGs, and the communication strategy that builds around that is going to be a priority for us, and member states are, of course, are all on board on this. The second one is climate.
What is the budget that you have for the department overall, and is that adequate?
The budget of the department is, I mean, the regular budget of the department is a lot of it, and most of it is actually the salaries of the staff of the department. We have some allocations for production material or for some others, but it's really the biggest component of our $90 million a year or something budget is salaries. And we always would like more budget.
Because I imagine that there is new opportunities in terms of creating, although you have been, you had a renovation in the building, right? You had the studios. I remember at the UN radio when I was working there many years ago, you have studios downstairs. I don't know if they're still downstairs, the TV and radio studios, which I believe have been upgraded since the renovation a couple of years ago.
That was part of the capital master plan. And also 2 years ago, we have, through a contribution from the Netherlands, we have now an SDG studio that is really state-of-the-art studio that is used for major events and activities that relate to the SDGs, but also the Secretary General, when he wants to do a video program that with other parts, it's really useful for that. But I guess what we try to do is the budget is the UN budget more or less has been staying the same. And actually, luckily for the last 2 years, at least we have not had reduction in the budget, which happened in previous years. What we try to do is that by collaborating and working with others, whether they are civil society, academia, football, sports, celebrities, social media, how can we amplify and reach more audiences? And I think through that targeted and focused approach, we have managed to amplify the messaging to the extent that in many parts of the world now, the SDGs are very well known. And there is actually, the climate change is in every discussion. People now are talking about climate change. And the challenge is, how do we move out of this crisis? How do we energize actions at the individual level, at the business level, at the community level, at the leadership and government levels? And all that takes time. So we build.
What about the private sector? Do you have the possibility, like some UN agencies, to receive support from the private sector? Let's say a technology company will come in and support a program, let's say, of bringing journalists instead of just for the General Assembly, for other conferences throughout the year. Is something that you have envisioned? Is it possible within the current structure for funding? Or something that's
there's always the possibility, of course, to have one-on-one agreement with an entity that they support the United Nations. But of course, there's always clarity, and there are certain concerns, well, certain constraints. When the UN partners or works with a private entity, it cannot be for the purposes that could be used by that entity as a commercial for the entity. You know? Are they interested because they are supportive of this issue, or is it because they just want to put their logo next to the UN logo, which they can't anyway? So it's on one-on-one cases, and there have been cases. I also worked with the Office of the Youth Envoy. The Youth Envoy has had very successful engagements with private sector companies that wanted to do campaigns or support specific campaigns that relate to youth and advocacy. We have managed, of course, we get into clear agreements. Our legal department discusses, and we also work with the creative community. So we work with, for example, film productions, television productions, that if they are a documentary, they want access, they want interviews with the UN, they want material, we provide it for them. It could be a fiction, that they also include a storyline that includes a UN theme that we can advise them. So we also collaborate. We also sign agreements on those levels. And I don't know if you have seen, a few years ago, we worked with Angry Birds, the film.
Mhm.
Angry Birds is a film, but I mean, we worked with Sony, not about the film, but they created content using the characters to promote messaging on carbon footprint and how do we reduce carbon footprint and how do we change our behavior, and it became really successful. We work with other UN agencies. Other UN agencies, of course, operationally, because they can, UNICEF gets a significant part of its actually income from the private sector.
Exactly.
Private
So does
individuals-
ITU as well, right?
Yeah, WHO, WFP, and
WFP as well.
so they do have. I mean, they can, any individual in the US, for example, if you contribute to a charitable organization, which is UNICEF for USA or USA for UNICEF, it's tax-free. So there are some ways to do these things. But as a UN secretariat, because we are not an operational agency, so it's more difficult. But so therefore, our collaborations are of a different nature.
Right.
We work together to promote these things. And when we work, for example, and we engage with a media campaign that includes social media. So if a messenger of peace, let's say Leonardo DiCaprio, then if he also tweets, or then it reaches his followers who are in the tens of millions on Instagram or 19 million on Twitter and so on, that then is an amplification of the audience that we are reaching. And this is something that we have been working with very closely on the priority issues for us, which is climate, SDGs, protecting the successful Black Sea grain initiative that has been crucial in enabling the export of food and grain from Ukraine, and the other side fertilizers from Russia and all of that. So the peace messaging on protection of refugees, migrants, and so on. So all of that, we do not leave an opportunity untapped.